Hello, and welcome back to the channel. Today's list is a little different from our usual deep dives into value and hidden gems, because today we're talking about legends. Watches that didn't just succeed in the market, but fundamentally shaped it. Timepieces so culturally embedded, so historically significant, and so technically influential that their names alone carry weight far beyond the watch world. From the ocean floor to the surface of the moon, from the racetrack to the cockpit, from the salons of Geneva to the wrists of heads of state, these are 10 watches that changed everything. This is the list that started conversations, broke records, and rewrote what people believed a watch could be. Let's count them down. Number 10. Rolex Submariner. There is no list of iconic watches, none anywhere, written by anyone, on which the Rolex Submariner does not belong. It is the dive watch against which every other dive watch has been measured since its introduction in 1953, and 7 decades later, that standard has not slipped. The Submariner defined the visual grammar of the tool diver. The rotating bezel graduated for elapsed time underwater, the Mercedes hands, the applied hour markers with their generous lume fill, the screw-down crown, the oyster case. Every element of its design was placed there with functional purpose, and every element has proven so correct that the watch industry has spent 70 years borrowing from it. Water-resistant to 300 meters, powered by Rolex's in-house caliber with the parachrome hairspring and Rolex's own escapement, the modern Submariner is a precision instrument of the highest order wrapped in the most recognized silhouette in watchmaking. Whether in steel, two-tone, or gold, with or without date, the Submariner is the benchmark. It has been worn by explorers, soldiers, divers, statesmen, and film characters whose names have become synonymous with cool. To own one is to own a piece of watchmaking history that happens to remain completely, effortlessly relevant today. The Rolex Submariner retails from approximately $9,100 USD for the no-date steel model. Number 9. Omega Speedmaster Professional Moonwatch. On the 20th of July 1969, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin stepped onto the surface of the moon, and on their wrists was the Omega Speedmaster Professional. That moment alone would be enough to secure the Speedmaster's place in history permanently. But the story is richer and more extraordinary than even that. Before NASA selected the Speedmaster for manned spaceflight in 1965, it subjected a range of chronographs to a battery of 11 tests, including extreme temperatures, vacuum, humidity, shock, and vibration. The Speedmaster passed every one of them. It did not just win. It survived conditions that destroyed its competitors. The watch that earned the right to go to the moon through pure, verifiable performance. The modern Moonwatch Professional remains faithful to that heritage with meticulous devotion. The Hesalite crystal, the asymmetric case, the manual wind caliber 1861 movement, the black dial with its 3 white subdials at 3, 6, and 9 o'clock. It is the rare watch that has earned every gram of its legendary status through documented, irreversible history. A certified space-qualified instrument, a chronograph of the highest order, and one of the most important objects ever strapped to a human wrist. The Omega Speedmaster Professional Moonwatch retails for approximately $6,300 USD. Number 8. Patek Philippe Nautilus. In 1976, Gerald Genta, the most gifted watch designer of the 20th century, drew the Patek Philippe Nautilus on a paper napkin during a trade fair in Basel. What he sketched that day was the porthole of an ocean liner, translated into a sports watch case with an integrated bracelet and a horizontally embossed dial that would become one of the most coveted objects in the history of luxury goods. The Nautilus Referstoff 5711, its most celebrated modern expression, is a watch of breathtaking restraint. The blue dial with its subtle horizontal relief, the applied hour markers, the perfectly integrated bracelet that has no beginning and no end. It simply flows. There is no watch in the world with a waiting list quite like the Nautilus. Authorized dealers stopped being able to sell them at retail because demand so catastrophically outpaced supply that secondary market prices climbed to multiples of the retail price without pause. This is what happens when a watch becomes a cultural object rather than merely a timepiece. Powered by Patek Philippe's in-house caliber with decades of refinement, finished to a standard of perfection that only a handful of manufacturers on Earth can match, the Nautilus is the watch that turned the concept of the luxury sports watch into a global obsession. The Patek Philippe Nautilus Refraut 5711 retailed for approximately $34,000 USD. Those secondary market values reached 2 to 3 times that figure at peak demand. Number 7. Audemars Piguet Royal Oak. If the Nautilus was Gerald Genta's masterpiece, the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak, which he designed 4 years earlier in 1972, was his declaration of revolution. No one had ever built a luxury sports watch in steel before. Steel was considered a material for tool watches, for professional instruments, for things that needed to be tough rather than beautiful. Genta changed that overnight with the Royal Oak, an octagonal bezel secured by 8 exposed hexagonal screws, inspired by a diver's helmet, housing an integrated tapisserie dial and bracelet of a complexity and finishing quality that the industry had never seen applied to a steel watch. It was audacious, it was controversial, and it was priced at the level of gold watches, which caused enormous scandal at the time. But it was also completely and immediately right. The Royal Oak's proportions, its petite tapisserie dial texture, its alternating polished and brushed surfaces, these are design decisions of such precision and confidence that they have required no fundamental revision in over 50 years. The Royal Oak did not just create the luxury sports watch category, it invented it. The Audemars Piguet Royal Oak found 15,500 retails from approximately $24,000 US. Number 6. TAG Heuer Monaco. The TAG Heuer Monaco arrived in 1969 wearing its intentions openly and provocatively. A square case, a blue dial, and a crown positioned on the left side rather than the right. It was the first automatic chronograph wristwatch ever made, and it was presented to the world with a design so aggressively unconventional that it remains, over 50 years later, one of the most immediately recognizable watches ever produced. The Monaco's association with Steve McQueen, who wore one on his wrist throughout the filming of the 1971 motorsport film Le Mans, gave it a cultural gravity that transcended horology entirely and entered the broader conversation about cool, about style, and about the kind of person who wears a square watch and doesn't explain themselves. The Caliber 11 movement inside the original was a landmark of engineering, the result of a collaborative project between several manufacturers to bring the automatic chronograph to market. The modern Monaco carries that heritage faithfully, retaining the unconventional case shape, the left side crown, and the distinct 3-register dial layout that has defined it from the beginning. This is a watch that never needed anyone's approval, and that independence is precisely the point. The TAG Heuer Monaco retails from approximately $5,800 USD 5. Number 5. Seiko Presage. The Seiko Presage earns its place on this list not through horological records or celebrity association, but through something rarer and, in some ways, more impressive: the democratization of genuine artistry. Japan has a craft tradition of extraordinary depth: lacquerwork, enamel, textile weaving, porcelain. And the Presage collection has spent years translating that tradition into watch dials of breathtaking beauty, produced at prices that make them accessible to anyone who cares to look. The Presage line encompasses everything from cocktail-inspired layered lacquer dials in deep purples and rich ambers, to traditional Japanese enamel work, to dials inspired by Japanese porcelain and washi paper. Each variant is a small act of cultural preservation, craft techniques passed down through generations, applied to an object you wear every day. Beneath these remarkable dials beats a range of Seiko automatic movements of proven reliability and honesty, including the premium caliber 6R35 with its 70-hour power reserve and high-beat variants for the higher-spec models. The Presage is proof that the pursuit of beauty in watchmaking is not the exclusive territory of Geneva and Le Locle, that Japan has its own profound contribution to make and has been making it quietly and brilliantly for decades. The Seiko Presage retails from approximately $300 to $2,500 USD, depending on collection and complication. Number 4. Casio G-Shock. The Casio G-Shock changed the watch industry's understanding of what a watch could survive, and in doing so, created an entirely new category of timepiece that has endured for over 40 years without any serious challenger to its throne. The story of the G-Shock's creation is the story of one engineer's obsession: Kikuo Ibi, a Casio engineer who dropped and shattered his father's watch and refused to accept that watches had to be fragile. After years of development and over 200 prototypes, he arrived at a solution built around a floating module suspended inside a hollow case, with the back of the watch sealed entirely and the crystal protected by a raised bezel, a construction that could survive a 10-meter drop onto concrete and keep running. The first G-Shock, the DW5000C, launched in 1983 and sold poorly for years before American hip-hop culture adopted it and turned it into a global phenomenon. Today, the G-Shock family spans everything from basic digital models to multi-band radio-controlled solar atomic timepieces with GPS synchronization, all sharing that fundamental commitment to indestructibility. Military units worldwide issue them, astronauts wear them, and teenagers have worn them as cultural statements for 4 decades running. The G-Shock is the most resilient, most versatile, and most culturally persistent watch concept ever produced. The Casio G-Shock retails from approximately $50 to over $1,000 USD depending on model. Number 3. Cartier Tank. The Cartier Tank is 107 years old. It was designed by Louis Cartier in 1917, inspired by the aerial view of the Renault FT tanks advancing across the Western Front, and it has not aged a single day. That is either an extraordinary design achievement or a form of magic, and the line between the two is thinner than it appears. The tank's architecture is immediately legible in any photograph of any era. The 2 parallel rails running down either side of the case, continuing into the bracelet or strap, the rectangular dial with Roman numerals and a blued steel sword hand, the winding crown capped with a cabochon sapphire. Every version, the Tank Louis Cartier, the Tank Solo, the Tank Americain, the Tank Française, shares this visual DNA while expressing it in slightly different proportions and personalities. It has been worn by Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, Andy Warhol, Princess Diana, and an uninterrupted succession of the most stylish people on Earth across a century of constant change. That continuity is the tank's most remarkable achievement. It is a design so inherently correct that fashion has never been able to improve on it, only acknowledge it. The Cartier Tank retails from approximately $3,000 USD for entry steel models up to considerably more in precious metals. Number 2. IWC Big Pilot. The IWC Big Pilot is, in the most literal sense of the phrase, a pilot's watch, descended directly from the IWC Ref. 431 produced for the German Luftwaffe in 1940 and the later Ref. 5002, Market Fiends, supplied to the Royal Air Force. This is not marketing heritage. These were instruments issued to military aviators who needed to read the time accurately, at altitude, under pressure, with gloves on, and the design requirements that those conditions imposed on the watch are exactly the design features that make the Big Pilot visually extraordinary today. The large 46mm case, sized for legibility, not fashion. The onion crown, sized for operation with gloved hands. The clean, uncluttered black dial with large Arabic numerals and a central seconds hand. The anti-reflective coating on both sides of the sapphire crystal. The soft iron inner case protecting the movement from magnetic fields. Every specification exists for a functional reason rooted in aviation history, and together they produce a watch of imposing presence and absolute clarity. IWC's in-house automatic movements, regulated to chronometer precision in the modern references, honor that history with contemporary engineering excellence. The Big Pilot is the watch that means business in the most literal possible sense. The IWC Big Pilot retails from approximately $9,700 USD. Number 1. Breitling Navitimer. The Breitling Navitimer takes the top position today, and it does so as the ultimate expression of a watch built not for the wrist, but for the cockpit. An instrument of such complete and serious aviation purpose that wearing one feels like a declaration of intent. First introduced in 1952 and adopted as the official watch of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, the Navitimer's defining feature is its circular slide rule bezel, a fully functional analog computer capable of performing every calculation a pilot needs in flight. Fuel consumption, airspeed, rate of climb, distance, conversion between units. This is not decoration. Every graduation on that bezel has a purpose, and pilots flew with these calculations for decades before digital avionics made them redundant. That history is alive in every modern Navitimer, the crowded, information-dense dial that looks complex until you understand it, at which point it becomes a marvel of organized intelligence. The large case, the bidirectional rotating bezel, the 3 chronograph registers, the long pushers, everything about the Navitimer is scaled for readability and operation in the demanding environment of a cockpit. The COSC-certified Breitling manufacture caliber inside delivers precision timekeeping worthy of the instrument heritage. Steve McQueen wore one. Scott Carpenter wore one into space, and for over 70 years, it has remained the definitive answer to the question, what does a pilot's watch look like? It looks like this. The Breitling Navitimer retails from approximately $8,100 USD.